And welcome back to Pub for Heretics.
And Brink is away on holidays at the moment, so you just have the company of the two of us.
So pull up a chair and have some Grotsnot along with us. We are going to be quickly discussing a book that both of us have been reading that we wanted to talk about as our first episode, and that is the book Day of Ascension.
Woo! Genestealers.
Yeah, I never really tried much with Genestealers, but this is the first book. Is this their only book?
I think it might be. They're mentioned in other books, but.
Yeah, they usually mention as vessels for enemies or elements of trouble whenever there's Tyranid novels, but never really their own point of view book.
No, or, people causing trouble, like in the Infinite and Divine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Best line from Infinite and the Divine. You got us box seats to a coup.
Yeah.
Well, I heard the reviews were quite nice.
But we're not here to talk about Infinite and the Divine. We will surely
No, that's
have
another episode.
surely have an episode on that. But Day of Ascension. What did you think of the opening chapter?
Thoroughly enjoyed it because it gave us a good overview into both of the factions that we're going to be looking at today, which ironically I found a lot more in common with both of them than I did differences. Like they had a lot of similarities in the way that they were going about things and their own internal politics.
Yes, yeah, and even in some of their names, the Genestealers had taken from the Mechanicum.
Absolutely. And then isn't the first chapter the assassination attempt?
Yes, it is. So you have the leader of the world being very high and mighty, shaped like a bell, he's described as, that shows political strife that comes along with logic machines.
Yeah, and it's like the concept that they've created this machine, like this structure of hierarchy, where they can't even get out of their own way, and that's actually their biggest fallback is that they can't progress forward or get anything done because they're getting in each other's ways.
Yes. Also, I thoroughly enjoyed how they would diss on the one scientist, the main Mechanicum scientist's work
Triskelion.
Triskelion as fleshcraft. And
Yeah,
by
the
the
soft
weakness,
sciences.
the soft sciences. That's it. Yeah,
I just,
it
I
was
just couldn't
quite
believe that. Like
entertaining.
that. Yeah, because I thought Mago's biologists, which is like the people that deal with healing and helping people in that regard, and surgical sciences and all that. I thought there was at least some sort of regard as it's not the nicest part of the AdMech, but it's still considered an essential part. But I didn't know how much disdain they actually had for. We know the flesh is weak, and that's what they say. But I didn't realize how much of a disdain that they had for it.
Yeah, no, it's and I think it is exaggerated, particularly on this planet, but it
Mm,
is definitely, yeah, just that is part of their fundamental creed that the flesh
mm.
is weak, and the more you can replace with mechanical parts, the better.
And the fact that even though Triskelion was trying to come up with an idea of how to make the flesh stronger, so that way that you know that they could become better soldiers and better for the Imperium and the Omnissiah, even then they still didn't listen to him and didn't care because it's not considered an important part of their process in the cog.
Yeah,
And it just
lower on the ranks than even ceremony.
mm, exactly that's what they said. And I just thought it was really interesting. Because I've also never read an AdMech book before, or at least one from their point of view. They've always been secondary characters in other books I've read,
Yeah,
but it was a really good deep dive into two factions that I know nothing about.
yeah. So there were similarities between the how the Mechanicus functions in this book and how
Hmm.
they function in Brutal Cunning.
Hmm.
In both ways, it is their hierarchy and their need to do things a certain way that it actually leads to their flaws in both sides. So I think it's interesting that their logic and their straightforwardness is also their greatest downfall.
Because they could never think of the human populace as being a problem, and that they thought of them more as scrap to be used or
Tools.
offshoots of metal that they didn't need. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally disposable. Like in
Mm.
the first bit of the chapter, they're talking about the amount of lives that they're lost, and they're like, oh, well, this is above the percentage that is acceptable, but
Mm.
whatever. It's just people's lives. Doesn't really
Yeah.
matter.
And then we start going into the Day of Ascension. And I think this is also something about the I keep forgetting his name, the Lord individual, the one who's shaped like a bell, the one that's just shitting all over Triskelion and all his efforts, is that he cares more about the Day of Ascension than he does anything else. Like, cares more about ceremony. I'm not sure if that's an AdMech thing or if that's just a him thing.
Yeah, I think it's a world governor thing more so
Hmm.
than an AdMech thing. But yeah, definitely, it was he was more concerned with the ceremony
Hmm.
than he than other things that should have been on his radar, considering that he had an attempt on his life. Only
Hmm.
if, only like what was it, a week or two before the ceremony.
Yeah, something like that on the Fabricated General, which is, I think, yeah,
Yeah,
Testling. I think it's no, Testling was the other one.
yeah,
Anyways, yeah, so I thought that was interesting straight out of the bat, just an assassination attempt by a Gene Stealer Kelamorph right into it. And
yeah.
they're the cowboy looking ones, aren't they?
Yes, the three armed ones with the pistols.
Mm.
I can't remember her name, but she's kind of like a hero of the people.
Yeah, and I thought that was quite interesting. And the way that they did her, like, audio voice, I thought was like how it was just quite raspy. I
Yeah,
thought that was quite interesting. And then she
that
says
was
later
really
on
well
that I'm
done.
not a talker. That's not what I'm here for.
Yes, yeah, no, that was really well done. I agree. And yeah, so then after that point, we find ourselves from the point of view of one of the Gene Stealer girls who looks pretty much completely human. Um,
Davian.
Davian, who's the main character of the book, and
Mm.
I really liked her character.
I enjoyed it, and she said that because she was a few generations down from her great aunts and uncles, is that's the reason why it's because she now passed for human, and that the divine gene was diluted.
Yes, which is how she was able to get a job, basically running communications for some of the AdMech, and that's
Yeah,
what
as a
allowed
messenger
her the
between the lords and everything. Yeah,
yeah, which allowed her to have the passcodes to be able to slip in and out of the palace.
mm. And I found that quite interesting. I thought that their description of her was quite interesting as well. Did they say that she had like bio eyes, like the tech eyes?
I can't remember that bit. They may have.
Yeah. Yeah. Either way,
Yeah.
but like, and then when she's going down back into the slums of everything, and then she talks to the Magus, Clarissa.
Yes.
And this is also an interesting point as well, because usually the Gene Stealer cults are just kind of like put off as like these telepathic slaves to the Tyranids, and they're just like mindless creations. But I think this book was quite interesting because it got rid of that preconceived notion in my head, and that they're actually just people that genuinely believe in this thing. Like, obviously there's that biological component of them being infected,
Yeah, but
being
it
gene killed.
humanizes them.
Yeah, it humanizes it. It makes them feel more revolutionary than slaves.
Yeah, because they have been downtrodden, and it talks a lot about how everyone has lost a son or a cousin or like a brother in the mines or to the poisonous gases from the things that they're forced to mine for the AdMech.
Yeah, or being taken away and turned into Skitari.
Yeah, it was great. I also really enjoyed the. I didn't initially see it coming when they were talking about it, and she was like, "Oh, my brother's sick. I got to get back. I got to see my brother." And her
Mm.
brother's in the hospital bed, and the work that's being done by their doctor is actually turning him into an abominant.
Mm.
Which that was like, what? Oh, okay. So and that's what he was turned into.
Born of the big hammer. I don't know
Yeah.
why, but I always pictured it like in the book. I pictured him as a brood lord, like with a big giant like Gene Stealer carapace. But
Oh no, so he's described as even having his face split, like the Abominant and things like that. Like
mm,
he's described exactly how. I only know that because I put the model together only like, you know, just before I read the book.
yeah, but this is also that's me coming into it and being like, oh, okay, not knowing much about Gene Stealer or Tyranids.
Yeah, yeah, it's fair.
Hmm.
But super interesting. Like it taught me things about the Gene Stealer cult that I didn't know about.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. It might have been like their brood like their brood telepathy is quite weak.
Go on, get
Like disobeying each other and everything like that. But like the way Davian disobeys Magus Clarissa, and
Yeah.
I just thought that was quite interesting because I thought they were very automaton, very much like the AdMech or Necrons, how they have to follow the mission, follow this. But
Yeah,
no, they're a little bit more independent than what I thought they were.
they're more independent than the Tau. And
Which I
so
also find quite interesting.
yeah, so it comes from a place of like belief, stirred up by the fact that they are like so downtrodden
Mm.
and searching for something better.
But here's the thing, like, I don't like. I think that they would like go for the Tyranids regardless of what. But like, I just find it interesting how this Genestealer populace had technically two overlords. They had the Admech, and then they had the Tyranids that were on their way.
Yeah, pretty much. But
And,
the
and they were just like,
Tyranids are
yeah,
more like a god to them throughout the story
yeah,
than they are an overlord. Like it's a promise of freedom, and even
mm,
when towards the end, when Devian's talking to Clarissa, and oh no, maybe she's talking to the Calamorph, but she's like, it could just be this alien who's coming to eat us, and like,
mm.
are they coming to eat us, or are they coming to save us? And the Calamorph's like, why do you think that they're two separate things?
Yeah. Why do they have to be mutually exclusive?
Yeah, yeah, and it's like, well, to have a life that is better to die being eaten by what you consider to be your god, compared to like living under the Admech, is a real testament to how like terribly they were treated.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, the whole like don't try and be our overlords. We've already got one.
Yeah, I do find it funny though that the revolting like the population that revolts, and like the resistance, they weren't all Genestealer cults though. Like
They were
even
just normal people. Yeah.
yeah, some were just normal people that also got spurred up by these people, and that they had no idea what was coming for them. They absolutely just got gobbled by Tyranids without knowing better.
Hmm. So I think we'll go through the main plot parts of the book, and then we'll just try and dissect them. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So obviously we've got in the beginning, we've got the Kellamorph coming to assassinate the Fabricated General, and then obviously the Fabricated General just stops it along with Triskelion and the others, Skitarii. And
Which
this
the fact that
also was beautiful because
yeah,
like I just thought it was beautiful about Admech how like when Triskelion, I think it was, knocked to the ground and he's like losing an arm and he's about to die, and then his last reminder to himself was remind myself to upgrade the Skitarii reaction times.
yeah, yeah.
And I just thought, yeah, that's Admech. That is what I thought.
I also love the fact that the assassination attempt wasn't foiled by anything the Admech did. It was because he got so mad that he grabbed the Fabricated General and like pulled him off balance, and that was what stopped the bolt from killing the Fabricated General. So he was so mad that he ended up saving the guy's life by accident. I think
I
that's
thought that was cool.
yeah, it's a nice twist.
Because he's like, later on, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, he's like, oh, if I just hadn't stepped in, that would have just gone straight through him, and I would still have my arm, and
Hmm. And then, so yeah, even before then, Triskellion's trying to talk to the Fabricated General and be like, "Hey, we can do this with the flesh. We can do experiments. We can try and do this and make the flesh stronger, so that way it makes it easier on the mechanical part of things.
yeah, and
we
also
can make our
improves
Skitarii stronger."
yeah, improves the Skitarii and the bonding between flesh and metal.
Yeah, and they were just like, "Lol,
Yeah,
get lost, get lost."
yeah. Go play with your sloppy, sloppy flesh.
Yeah. You know what we're going to do? We're going to make you in charge of Day Ascension, just so that way you're useful and you can actually have something to be proud of.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I didn't realize how bitchy the internal politics of Admech were.
Yeah, yeah. No, they're like that in the other books that I've, well, mainly Brutal Cunning, but in other books, even when they're mentioned, like there is, like that kind of. There's human aspects in their emotions as much as they try to deny it.
Hmm. Yeah, that's actually a really good way of looking at it, is that the more and more they try and deny their humanity, the more they're victims to it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so going along with the plot, after that, after Debian has returned to her population, her great aunts and great uncles, as she calls them, down in the lower levels and the hidden
To try and warn
tunnels.
them about the Ascension Day and everything, yeah.
Yeah, to let them know that the assassination attempt failed, which they already know, obviously, because there is that mind link shared between them. They talk about it as being like between the shared genes. But yeah, absolutely is the Tyranid mind link.
Which I'm assuming the writer Adrian Tushosky, by the way, done a great job. I think
Yes.
the way it's interesting because, like, if you wanted to have the idea of the Genestealers being these automaton slave kind of things, you can have that idea because that could just be this hive, for example, where they're a little bit more independent. So I think that's the greatest thing about Warhammer is that you could have your own idea and it could potentially be canon one way or another, or there's at least like a little bit of justification for it.
I think the slaves in like the Tyranid forces are more so like the Hormagaunts and the Termagaunts and things like that. Things that don't really have like much of their own functioning brain. I think the Genestealers for the most part are supposed to be like as close to human as possible because that's what helps them stay undercover, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but guerrilla fighters and revolutionaries, because it's
Yeah.
because my first ever actual interaction with the Genestealer cult, out of being out of Warhammer for many years and coming back into it, was watching the Angels of Death series, where Blood Angels take on the Genestealer cult that has taken over the world, and they're just very religious, but they're also very militaristic.
Yes, yeah, and you know, absolutely. I really enjoyed that episode as well. It was great. I don't think that detracts from the fact that they have their own like sense of being, though. I think it is just militarism that is because of their religious zealotry.
And there's more than one Genestealer cult. There's like 6 playable, and then you can make up your own after that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no.
And then what happens? And then what happens next? I think Triskelion tries to round up people for Ascension Day to turn them into Skitarii, and then like do that culling purge thing, which
just
also blew
that.
my mind.
Oh, just before that, we get introduced to his lab, where he has.
Oh yeah, his lab mates. Yeah.
Yeah, where he you meet the head in the jar and the stitched skin, who are the other 2 members of the soft sciences or the Mechanicus biologists.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a talk, and he's like, all right, well, then he goes and starts his roundup in the town.
So they're essentially his yes men.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then this is where it also hit home to me a little bit before, because I knew that Admech never cared about humanity or cared about human beings, but I just never knew as to how much they literally thought of them as nothing.
Yeah.
Because they were just like, all right, start culling the strong ones, and then unbelievably, when they were taking that one kid away, and the woman's like, stop, he's my only son, you can't take him.
Yes.
And then the Skitarii is just like, you failed to report that your other sons had died, therefore we are allowed to take him.
Yeah, it's like you didn't fill out the necessary forms stating that your other children had died. The records show that you still have 3 sons, so we're taking him. Yeah.
Oh, it's unreal. Yeah, you have shown that you did 1 hour's work of Centrelink, therefore your Centrelink payments are no longer allowed to come.
Yeah, it's like it's really, really messed up. And the fact that everyone, like, they don't even fight back at that. They're all just so downtrodden that they just accept it.
Well, if you're only ever treated one way, you'll think it's normal.
Yeah, also, they do have a bunch of robot men pointing guns at them, so I guess there's not a lot they could do. Well,
at one point they did start fighting back, yeah. At one point they put up like a blockade in the street, and then the Skitarii are just like, lol.
Yeah, and Triskelion's just sitting on top of his chariot full of like Genestealers and like human slaves that are just like being piled inside.
And then that's when he comes across the Underhive, which is where he comes across the Genestealers, and then he sees their differences in the extra limbs, the carapace armor, the thick skin, and the jaws, and he's just like, you are what I've been looking for. You are a mutation.
Yeah, he's like, this is interesting. And then, like, they're being shot and the wounds are healing over, and he's like, that's very interesting. I'm going to capture some and not tell them that they're for Ascension Day, not tell the higher-ups that they're to use them for Ascension Day, but to keep them for myself to study in my lab.
Send them to a different cage. And then that's when he comes across Tesseling in the underground laboratory.
Yes. There's the scientist who, well, he refers to himself as a doctor for those people.
Mm-hmm. I always pictured the mad scientist from Frankenstein.
Absolutely.
That's essentially what it is.
Yeah, I mean, he and Triskelion both kind of are. He's working with underground, like, scavenged bits and all that. And obviously Devian's brother, who is injured and has been really sick, has been being treated by that guy, and he's down there as well.
And then he's like tied up to a table, being told, being turned into a abominant, and then he's let go, and then the abominant's starting to take out Skitari, and Triskelion is like, "I will kill him if you don't stop him," and then he
Yeah,
does.
and so he's like, child, child, and the guy the Devian's brother listens to him, and then he gets injected with something, and also is chucked into a cage to be studied later on.
And Davian's just upset by this, and then it just gets a bit more like into the internal politics of the Genestealers and the AdMech, and then we later find out that Triskellion's talking to the Fabricated General. He's just like talking about how useful he is, and they shouldn't be doing the Day of Ascension preparation. He's just like, I have done this, I have done this, I have put forward these theses and project ideas, I have done this, and I've done this research. I am valuable to the machine.
And then to Mars, yeah.
Yeah, from here to Mars, I will have like followers. I will have people that will listen to me. And then the Fabricated General's like, yeah, I burned all of that when the moment you gave it to me. Then it was quite funny.
Do you really think that I sent forward any of your propositions or theses to Mars? They're not interested in your soft sciences. I wouldn't waste their time with this. And he's just like, just like dumbstruck for a minute. He's just like, wait.
Mate, I'm not Triskelion, and I was like devastated.
Yeah, it's like 7 years. Yeah, 7 years of work that he's been doing. None of it's left the planet. He's like, oh, I've shaved 7 seconds off the reaction time for certain things based off like this.
I have increased these healing gels by 33%.
Yeah. And he's like, no, none of that reached Mars. None of your work is good enough.
People don't even know you're alive, probably.
Yeah, no one knows that you've done anything with your time. You will now be the Master of Celebrations, or the Master. What was it? What was the
Fabricated General.
No, yeah. The Fabricated General's term for the Day of Ascension? What did he title him? Is it Master of Celebrations or Master of Festivities?
Yeah, Master of Ceremonies, I think.
Yeah, and it's just like the biggest slap in the face. He's like, all right, whatever. So he basically storms out of there so mad, under threat of the Fabricated General's bodyguard, who's there with a Castellan robot. Wild. The way the Castellan robots are described is just like wicked.
I thought it was quite interesting as well with Triskellion's just like hatred of anything that isn't science related, because the Fabricated General is a little bit more flamboyant when it comes to like artworks, and he's like a bit more ceremony. He's got his priorities different places.
Yeah.
And then when Triskelion gets to that point where he's looking at the Fabricated General's art collection and he's just like fantasizing about destroying it.
Yeah, and even when he's talking about the palace, he's like, it's very inefficient the way that he's done it. He's opened it up and left like stained glass windows open, and the only security he's like left installed is the outer wall of the palace. Everything else is like easy to breach because he preferred art or like big glass windows to look down over the population. And he's just like utter contempt for it. Like, this is inefficient. This is not what we're supposed to be. Yeah. And then after that, they have interesting scene with more like studies, but also Davian, after storming out, after talking to Clarissa, goes on her own mission to try and free her brother and the Kellamorph, whose name I really need to remember. The hero of the story. Well, I mean, Davian's the hero of the story, really, but this other Kellamorph lady.
Yeah, but she's just crippled by self-doubt the entire time.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, it, like, would be the case if you were just like a server under a huge, what they call, like, in the mechanical cog.
So what happens next? I'm unsure, sorry.
Oh, so she sneaks in along, like, passageways over the big bell jar containers that they're being kept in the lab. She sees her brother and the other, like, captured aunts and uncles. Then she goes along to the very end where the Kellamorph is pinned up in a jar, and there are Skitari outside guarding it, and she's trying to work out how to get in there and free her. When Triskelion comes in to do some more tests on her, that's when she
Yeah, because
basically
at this
listens.
point the city's in like near uprisal because it's Ascension Day, isn't it?
No, not yet. So
Oh, that's right.
this
Yeah,
is
she
still
got captured.
before
Yeah, I forgot
it's
about that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's right. Yeah.
she goes in. She doesn't get to rescue them at this point, but she wants to, and yeah, basically she judges it as being unable to, and I forget why she leaves. But basically, I think she can't find a way to get them out, so she
I think it's
goes
another
back.
self-doubt thing.
Yeah, and then she decides instead to follow Triskelion from there back to his personal lab, and she's going through and she's using her codes to follow along behind him when it gets to his own cordoned off section where she can't get into it.
Mm-hmm.
But then she's caught by Triskelion, and Triskelion is like, huh, what do we have here? Take me to where all of the rest of your kind are. Because he had only found a certain amount under the city. The fully mutated ones were even deeper down in caves and labyrinths. And basically, under threat of purging the whole city with bombs, she takes him to meet the great aunts and uncles. Because he's formulated a plan to try to get himself into the position of fabricated general.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they travel back down. They're met outside by a bunch of very, very unhappy Genestealers and human slaves, and to which Davian tries to calm things down. Doesn't really go that way. Davian is dragged in front of Clarissa, the head of their like church.
The Magus, yeah.
The Magus, essentially, and Triskelion follows with his guard to then speak to the aunts and uncles, and they basically come to an agreement under threat of extermination that they will rise up on Ascension Day. After that, Triskelion leaves.
Cause a massive ruckus.
Yeah, Triskelion goes to leave, and this part I thought was really interesting. I don't really know why, and he doesn't know why, but he didn't have to agree to them. But before he leaves, Clarissa turns to him and goes, was it Clarissa or Davian? I think it's Clarissa. Is like, we need the Kelemorph for this. They're the only one that she'll follow. We need the codes that will break her out of...
I think it was Davian that said that to Magus.
Yeah, it might have been. And then it's like, I need the codes to break the Kelemorph out of her prison on Ascension Day.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives them to her so that the Kelemorph and some of the other aunts and uncles that are being trapped down there can be freed with a frequency code that shatters all of the jars that are holding the prison. So yeah, and then we have a moment when, after that, Triskelion is talking, or like going through data of the Skitarii, now that he's been basically put in charge of them. And he reroutes everything so that it has to go through him and not the fabricated general.
I'd also like to point out as well that the reason why Ascension Day is happening is because a large contingent of Skitarii have returned from their wars in the stars, and then that's when they're going to be replenished with new Skitarii rangers, because the old Skitarii coming back also plays a big part.
Yes. So that they've had a bunch of Skitarii return that he now basically answer to him alone, which is what's given him the feeling
edge.
like the feeling like he can usurp the fabricated general and get away with it. So then Day of Ascension comes, and the ceremonies are taking place. Riots begin up in the streets as per his plan, and he's like, okay, you know, a very few Skitarii are left there to deal with it and stop them to getting from onto the train, onto the mag trains. But of course, it's all part of his plan, and it's just like a farce, and he's not letting anyone know at the theatre what's going on. Davian has made her way in to where the Kelemorph is being kept, along with a bunch of the aunts and uncles. Not her brother or the doctor, but they're in Triskelion's lab. But she's gotten in there with the codes, and as all the AdMech are watching the ceremony, and they're about to have the prisoners raised up out of the floor and dunked into basically a giant boiling pot, so that they can extract all of the minerals from their body and stuff like that to use in further processing as part of their ceremony. The floor rises, and the crowd slowly realizes that they are not in their cages and that they are all armed. And the shooting begins. So then, uh, this is when the revolt fully starts, and shots are fired. The fabricated general turns to Triskelion to blame him, just saying, "Oh, you know, you've done such a terrible job of protecting the ceremony. You know, this is the last time you're the minister of festivities or whatever."
You couldn't even manage to do this.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I loved his voice. We also have to give a shout out to the person that narrated it. I think it was Harry Myers narrated it, and he did such a good job of doing different voices for different characters. And when they would, and that's the thing, when they're talking, I know who's talking without them saying as this character said or says this character, because the voices in an audiobook are just so important.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was really well done. He struggled a little bit with female voices, but I think that's a bit of a
I would
common
argue
thing.
that's just a guy. I would argue that's just a guy thing, because I would say if lady narrators always struggle with guy voices too.
Absolutely, I've noticed it in most audiobooks, and it's very rare for people like guys who are doing the voice acting to be able to nail different female voices. But he did really well for the most part.
Yeah, like even like say for example Matt Mercer from Critical Role, even when he does female voices, it still has that male tinge to it, and it's something that you can struggle with unless you've really honed your skill at it, or you're just really born with it. And
Yeah.
I don't. And whenever there's a female voice and it's narrated by a guy, or vice versa, I just kind of write it off and don't really. I can't judge them on that performance.
No, yeah, it's totally fair, and he did a great job, honestly. Even just you did, like you said, you knew who was talking without having to have it like explicitly explained.
And when like the Kellamorph is talking and talking like this, I'm not meant to be the talker. It's just like you're like, okay, I can see this character in my head now.
Yeah.
And then when she's talking, or when he's talking, or when the Fabricator General is talking like this, you know who it is, and it just feels the right level of imposing and immersion.
And it must be so hard to do different AdMech voices.
Oh, and it must be hard as well, because this thing goes for almost 6 hours.
Yeah, but
And
then
this
also
is a short one.
yeah, but like because they're all like slightly robotic and they're like talking, but there's enough distinction between their voices that you know who's talking.
Yeah.
that was really well done.
Yeah.
So then after that, they the Triskelion and the Fabricated General disappear back to the palace to hole up for safety.
And it's at this point Davian and the Kellamorph are like trying to rile up the other Genestealers that are in the vaults, and then she finally finds her voice.
Oh, so they've broken out of the vaults, but yeah, so they've all taken up arms, and they're and yeah, she inspires them as they're cutting through the Skitarii that have come in to try and like kill them off.
Yeah, and she has a character development moment.
Yeah, where she hears the voices of the angels.
Yeah, and the moment she said that, I'm just like, oh dear God.
Yeah, they're coming.
They're here.
Yeah. No,
and I'm like, GTFO, mate, get out, run.
Yeah, but like, it was really well done, that scene actually, because she's like stammering, she doesn't know what to say. Then suddenly there's clarity, and she feels a presence within her, and then she knows exactly what to say to stir up the troops. And
Now, here's the thing. When I read that, is that part of you think to the hive mind of them like inspiring others and having that revolutionary thing in it? Because she's like, I don't know where this is coming from. And then when she stopped talking in the speech, she's like, oh, it's gone now. I'm back to where I was before. I'm like, is that a genetic thing? Because it's not the first time it happens.
I think it is part of the hive mind. It's the telepathic communication. The same way that they knew that the Kellamorph had failed in her mission. All those things they know without being told. There's like shared connections between them. This book actually made me think of the hive mind as almost like the Tyrannid god, or like one of the Tyrannid gods. So they are essentially that level of powerful. As I mean, they freaking are. Like it's wild what they can do.
Yeah, and this is like a shadow of that, like a symptom of that thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like them barely reaching out with their mind across like a vast distance. But it's also just wild because they knew exactly what to say to stir up humans.
Hmm.
Like,
Exactly. And humans who are not even part of the hive mind, like not even
yeah,
part of it.
yeah, which is just crazy. But then, so at that point, the revolutionaries had taken over the mag train, um, and so they've like all arrived and kind of regrouped in the big battle. But then they need to get to the palace, and the Calamorph is like, I still have a job to do. I still have to kill the fabricated general.
Mhm.
And this is when we get to see the jackals, which were my first Genestealer cult units.
Oh yeah, when they ride off on the bikes. Yeah.
The bikes and the ATV, and yeah, it's fantastic. Just see them plow through Admech and crushing skulls with like wrenches and things like that as they're flying through.
The big giant drills as well.
Yeah, and they even described a few of the things that are in the models, like in the kits, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it just kind of like when Davian was in that warehouse and they're just like getting everybody riled up, and they're seeing the banners of all the different cults in different places around the planet, and people who are not even part of it still joining in, and then you're just like, and then you see the Skitarii come in, and then you see everybody starting to fight back, and then the guns blazing, mining drills going, mining tools going off, anything at all, and it just kind of reminds me of that meme where the guy's just like, are you guys? Do you guys just have a plan, or are you just doing this as you're going along? And the guy says, "Yes."
Yes, yeah, it's exactly that. And then once they've killed enough Skitarii, they go around and they grab the Skitarii guns, and they're like, "All right, upgraded weapons, woo!" And it's just
Rogue
like
trader,
an RPG.
rogue trader time.
Yeah, it's an RPG, real life. But then
Yeah.
so they the Calamorph and Davian go flying off towards the palace because Davian can get her into the palace.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to rescue her brother, the doctor, and kill the fabricated general. Is basically their plan.
And I think it's at this point as well where Triskelion's like talking to himself and talking to his others and Doctor Tessling about about what he plans to do with them and what he's planning to do with this like ruckus, and that he's going to turn it around, and he's going to be the hero. And then at the doorway is the fabricated general.
Yeah, like treachery.
Yeah, and then like I was just like, and that's the thing I was talking about. The voice acting is that when the moment you hear his like voice coming from the doorway, I'm just like, oh
Yeah.
no.
My Triskelion.
Yeah.
No,
And it's just like,
that was great. And the part that I like that they it was almost like intentionally misleading that you thought that they were in the lab. So then they get into like a tussle, and the Skitarii can't shoot at Triskelion because of the close quarters between him and the fabricated general. And then it switches back to Davian and the Calamorph breaking into the lab, and you're like, oh, but where's the fabricated general and the thing? But they're up in like a viewing dock.
yeah, looking at the parade.
Yeah, looking out at like screens and stuff, and they're not in his lab. And so then they
And then they end up getting her brother out of the thing, and he's still cognizant. He's still like, "Hello, sister," like talking a little bit, but
yeah. But then the fabricated general's bodyguard turns up with a Castellan robot and a bunch of Skitarii. And we get an Abominant versus a Castellan, which was just awesome. The way that was described, with like the Castellan using its flamer, like just burning off the flesh of her brother as it
and then
tried
he's
to
knocking
regrow.
out metal.
Yeah, as his skin's like and carapace is like regrowing while it's being burnt off, and as he's just taking the punishment and protecting her.
It is kind of it is interesting seeing that like fight, because it kind of encapsulates the fight, like what's stronger, the metal or the skin.
Yeah, that was the battle, and like the robot starts to slowly win, but then Davian, in a moment of bravery, grabs the Skitari's rifle. What do they call them? I can't remember now.
Aren't they called carbines?
Carbines, yes. And then she runs, and she's a terrible shot. I love that they didn't make her immediately a great shot. She's not very good at shooting. She misses like 10 shots, and then
It would have been too Disney Princess if she got it the first time.
yeah, that like they didn't make her Mary Sue. She just straight up was like boom, 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 and it all hit the wall, and then
Haha, I did it. No, I
yeah,
didn't.
and then
Yeah.
finally her final shot manages to clip the fabricated general's bodyguard in the head, which was sending out all the directions for the Castellan robot in binary, and the Castellan robot basically just stops and guards the door.
And isn't that when the brother kind of keels over a bit?
Yeah, he falls and succumbs to his injuries, and she runs over to him, and is
Which I
like,
think encapsulates again the weaknesses of both. Is one is that the flesh will eventually run out and endurance does run out, and that the mech, that directive control and whoever is in control of the metal, aka the armies and Skitarii and all that, whoever's in control is the problem.
yes, yeah,
So it highlighted the fight, but it also highlighted what was wrong with both factions, their weaknesses, as it were.
yeah, absolutely. So then we have skipping back to the fabricated general and Triskelion's fight, which Triskelion wins and ends up blasting holes into the fabricated general, where all of his mechanized organs spew out in front of him. And then he looks at the view screen and sends Skitarii down to grab Davian.
Yeah, he tells the veteran Skitarii to start doing their thing with the crowds.
Skitarii Alpha, yeah.
Mm.
Which is the more human of the Skitarii. The Skitarii are all just basically servitor robots, but the Alpha still has some level of human in him still.
Yeah. Or at least a degree. I don't think every single Skitarii is the same, but I think the process for them to be Skitariized, I'll say instead of serverized, is similar. But
Yes.
it's not exactly the same.
Yeah, but they, for the most part, run on instructions, kind of like the Castellan robots, where they don't do anything apart from stand still when they're not, because on their
default programming.
Yeah, because their entrance to the palace, they go past a room full of them just standing there because they haven't been given orders.
Yeah.
But then the alphas are the ones who relay orders based on logic protocols, but also have some free thinking themselves.
Mm.
But yeah, so the alpha pulls her up and takes her to Triskelion, and this is when the big reveal happens.
Yeah, when he's just about to kill Davian. Oh, and he kills the Calamorph.
Oh yeah, he kills the Calamorph.
Yeah, and then that just shocked Davian, and the brother was dead, so it was just Davian. And then she's about to die from the Skitarii Alpha and follow the Triskelian's orders, but he reneges and doesn't want to do it.
Yes.
And questions why.
He starts hearing the voice of the angels, or talks about how he used to hear the voices of the angels. And
Yeah, even when he was on the battlefield.
Yeah, so part of his human memory, him being a Genestealer from back in the day, before he had most of his body replaced by machine parts, the flesh that still remains, he remembers the voice of the angels, which is obviously the Tyranids, and he then he can't bring himself because of the protocols to kill Triskelion, but he hands the gun to Davian, and she kills him.
And the Dr. Tessling says to Triskelion, the ultimate irony is that you were starting a project to see if you could infuse our DNA with the DNA of, Skitarii to make them stronger. The problem that you didn't realize is that that project had already happened.
Yeah, but it is our project, and we've been part of it for decades, and you had no idea.
And Triskellion's just oh god, how many generations of Skitarii are out there that are infected with this and just waiting to be called out by the Tyranids?
Yeah. Which then it skips ahead a week after Ascension Day.
After Triskellion's been killed by Davian.
Yeah, after she's killed him. And then she's there talking with Clarissa, the head of the Genestealers, and the Alpha is there as well.
And Dr. Tessling and Davian.
Yes, and they're preparing the ship, Or the ship.
Yeah, and Davian's confused. She's like, why are you preparing the ship? And then, yeah, the Skitarii Alpha's just like, we still have to go. We have to go liberate everybody else.
Yeah, we have to go and spread the message to the other Skitarii brothers that are out there.
Mm.
Which is terrifying.
Oh yeah, I was like, oh no, oh dear God, we have to go make sure that everybody, all the Skitarii and all the other soldiers that have been left out there, remember the voice of the angels. And then the Magus, and Magus Clarissa is like, it's your turn now, Magus Davian, to go out there.
Yeah, you have the voice that can awaken the song of the angels in the Skitarii.
Mm.
And
and she's like, we are denying you the privilege of, meeting the angels because you have to go and make sure that everybody else can.
Yeah, no gobble gobble for you. You have to go and continue living.
Basically, this is something I've always wanted. Do Genestealers know that they are going to be, turned into soup?
Well, Davian certainly did. And I believe from the interaction where she's talking to Clarissa, she mentions that again at the end. And Clarissa says a similar thing to what the Calamorph had said, and it's like, well, yes, that is what's going to happen, essentially. Or her words are something like, our sacrifices will provide, some of us died on the battlefield, the others will sacrifice to be returned to the greater body of the angels, or something like that.
Yeah, and be turned into angels,
Yeah. So I think on some level they know.
At least this cult does.
Yeah, or the higher ups in the cult do. But it's
the older ones probably.
Yeah, but it's religious fervor, where self-sacrifice is worth it in that point.
Yeah. And then her and Dr. Tessling and the Skitarii Alpha are starting to leave, and then as they're viewing the planet from their shuttlecraft, they see the Tyranids turning up, and I can't imagine a more scarier sight than that. As you're leaving your planet and you're seeing these big giant biomass ships coming towards it, and it's literally raining Tyranids on the planet.
Yeah,
and I'm just like,
the way they described it was like a ship of wriggling flesh with one great big open maw that spewed forth tiny specks of which she knew to be the angels coming down to land on the planet.
Yeah, they're so beautiful. I'm like, that's a goddamn nightmare.
Yeah, that's fucked. But just fantastic though.
And then the book ends.
Yeah, with her off to convert Skitarii into more Genestealers.
Yeah, and Dr. Tessling to keep going, and the Skitarii Alpha to awaken the other soldiers, and I'm like, oh god.
Yeah, it's really good though. I didn't know that was the direction it was going to take, and I was just so happy.
I had an inkling that's where it was going. I knew that the Genestealers were going to win because I knew that this was their story. Yeah. But I didn't know that it was going to come full roundabout like that.
I didn't realize the Tyranids were going to make an appearance at the end of the book.
I had an inkling halfway through when they kept saying that the song's getting stronger, and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, I thought that was just driving them further, and that maybe we wouldn't even see it in the book, but it was they were happy until they weren't. I didn't expect the twist of her going out to convert more Skitarii that came from their planet.
Yeah, and I just find it interesting, it's a very satirical kind of book in a way, because of the opposing ideologies, but at the same time it's the exact same. They just believe in a different god. One's in the Omnissiah, one they've never seen, and then one's in these angels that they've never seen.
Yeah.
And then, I think it's just quite... I would say that AdMech are the most grimdark, faction, pretty much the most, if not all, because of the way that they devalue human life, and, they do it all, and they don't even need to, but they do it anyways, and how backwards traditionalist dogma they are.
Yeah, but I just find they don't like anything new. Everything that is worth knowing has already been known, and we just have to rediscover it.
Exactly. And I'm just setting up a system to use people as fuel. Eventually those people are just going to be like, no. and then because like you're rebelling against, and then the Genestealers, you're rebelling against one tyrant because you want another one,
Yeah,
and
or you
it
want
just
to
like
die.
yeah, and it's just like the
Essentially.
idea of that it's basically two fanatical cults going up against each other, like faith being part of the politics, and like the faith just kind of like determine like stops you from like self questioning yourself, like and never at any point do apart from Davian, apart from her, nobody in the either of these cults like have a chance to like look inward and say, are we the problem?
Yeah,
Should we be like following these values? Should we be actually looking a little bit deeper? No, Davian's the only one that did that, and then
I think that's
that
part
that
of
got
what.
squashed.
Yeah, I think that's part of why I really liked Debian, was
Hmm.
that because it wasn't just self doubt, even though there was some of that. It was
Hmm.
like she questioned the legitimacy of everything that she'd like always known.
Yeah, because Triskelion is basically like you do know that your gods, your angels that you're talking about, are basically just alien Xenos, and
Xenos
that you guys,
bugs, yeah,
yeah, and that you guys are left over from an attack they did centuries ago.
yeah, which
And I just thought that was funny that she was like, actually, she went to the Megos and went to the Calamorph and was like, um, oh, should we be following this? Like, are we the baddies?
yeah,
And it was
like.
like, no,
Are we just gonna end up getting gobbled by bugs? Like, is that what we're
yeah,
hoping for here? And they're
yeah,
like, yeah.
yeah. It's just like the Chad meme, just like, yes,
Yes, but we're gonna kill a bunch of robot. I also liked that. Just reminded me how they kept referring to them as the Hollow Men.
yeah. I thought that was beautiful. If you didn't say it, I was going to.
Yeah, the Hollow Men, and I was like, that's perfect.
And they just call them cogs and all that. Like, oh, I'm not sure if that's Road Trader, but yeah, like that kind of like you're not human.
Yeah, yeah, because they try so hard not to be human. But I
Yeah.
think because I've read a couple of books now that are not Space Marine centered, like Infinite and the Divine, fantastic book, definitely way up there on my list. Brutal
And then you read
Cunning,
Brutal Cunning.
yeah, really enjoyable. Again, AdMech with the bad guys, Orcs with the good guys,
Mm.
Xenos Supremacy, um, uh, and it's just I want to rate it in between those two, and I think it probably is just like maybe slightly better than Brutal Cunning, but Brutal Cunning was more of like a fun book, and this was just a ridiculously well written book that I
Yeah.
thoroughly enjoyed the story of.
Bit of a philosophical quandary.
Yeah, whereas the Brutal Cunning is like a single fight in a book,
Yeah.
essentially.
Whereas Infinite the Divine is just wow.
Yeah, well, that Infinite and the Divine kind of was hundreds of years. Brutal
No,
Cunning
no,
covers a
millions of
day.
years.
Millions of years. Brutal
Yeah.
Cunning covers a day. This book
Yeah.
covers like a month.
Yeah, or a week or two or something like that before
Yeah.
Ascension Day. So yeah, it's just like it's interesting, but like I've only ever read two books that weren't Space Marine related. So like this and Infinite the Divine. Infinite the Divine will always be the better one, but like this that doesn't mean that this one isn't good.
Yeah. No, I
This was
agree.
like a short story in comparison because how long is like Infinite the Divine? It's like 14 hours, 12 hours, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. So it's
Whereas
probably
this one
about
was
half the
six.
length.
Yeah, about half the length easily. I'm just
Be-
gonna pull it up here.
Really, just quite an amazing book. I went into it expecting to like it, but I liked it more than I thought I would.
Yeah, Infinite Divine is 13 hours and 20 minutes, whereas this one's just about 6 hours. So obviously it's hard to compare the two when it's basically like half the content. But you can also tell a good story in that amount of time, which they've done.
Yeah.
But Infinite Divine will always be the better Xeno story to me.
Oh, Infinite and the Divine is up there even in comparison to some of the Space Marine books.
Oh, easily, if not one of the better books.
Yeah, yeah, way, way up there. It's just.
But then again, that's another story for another time.
It is, and we will definitely have an episode on Infinite and the Divine, and it will probably be a 2 hour episode.
Hmm,
'Cause
probably because we've already read it, but Jane Brink hasn't yet.
No, yeah, and this has been an hour talking about Day of Ascension.
Hmm. Is there anything you want to mention before we sign off?
I think we've pretty much covered it all.
Hmm.
Yeah, Xenos Supremacy. Go the go the Genestealer cults. They're
Yeah,
awesome.
sure. Whatever. Death Watcher coming for you, mate.
As long as it's not the AdMech.
That's fair. Bye.
For the glory of chaos!